looking, I like to, somebody say I'm looking pretty. Am I looking pretty?
Pretty. I think
Okay,
it's
thank
pretty,
you.
pretty good.
David might have some information he wants to share with us.
Okay. Well, we got, there's the agenda, so whatever you can.
The tallies and so.
It depends.
I wonder where Mr. Britt went. He's on the
I
planning
grew up
commission.
around Kevin Talley and, you know him, and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leland Talley, I've,
Okay,
done some work
well-
with him. He's done septic tanks for me.
Okay, it's 6:00. Let's call the meeting to order. We'll have a moment of silence. Mr. Charlie, can you do the opening prayer? And I'm gonna pick on Chris to do the pledge this time. You wanna do the pledge, Chris?
Sure.
Okay. Moment of silence, please. Mr. Charlie?
Lord, we're so thankful to live in a county and a state and a country where agriculture still is alive. Lord, just help us to make the decisions that we need to make. Lord, just be with each and every one of our families. Lord, we have a special prayer tonight for one of our members. Just watch over them. Help us, Lord, to do your will. Again, be with all of our farmers in the county and the state. Help us to do what we need to do to make agriculture better for our county. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. I have not looked at the minutes to, let's look over the minutes, please, sir.
Make a motion to set the minutes.
Motion made to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
Second. Have any discussion or need any amendments? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes pass as written. Thank you for taking good minutes there, Mr. Nate. First item would be farmland protection. Mr. Richard Carr is coming from Farm Bureau, but he has to travel and he's had a little difficulty, so he's gonna be probably 25 minutes late or so. So we'll discuss what we can on the agenda and then maybe call a short recess till he arrives and gets set up.
Mr. Blanton, also, if you just want to rearrange the agenda and have any sort of district reports in that order, you can.
Okay.
So do that as well.
Good, okay. Very good. All right, any,
You want to talk about the signage first?
we, yeah, I can do that. We can do them in any order we want to. The signage, if you want to start with that, I did speak with Mr. Shirley, and he's gonna speak with Ms. Brock and Mr. Halbig and see the right format, the right fit, getting the mechanics of the signage sort of worked out and starting the process and get approvals. It has to go before DOT, and they have to approve it based on their criteria. A lot of things that y'all have seen, the matrix he gave us a few months back about these signs depend on traffic, the nature of the sign, the size of the road, the speed limit. There's so much to it. Charlie knows a lot about it that I didn't know, but I've learned a lot. So there's a lot of approvals that have to go, get done. So I've called Mr. Shirley, we've worked on that, and so we've got the ball started. I'm sure it can be amended a little bit, and we probably will tweak it some more, but it's in the process. We told him we could attach it to a sign that's existing. We're good with putting up a separate sign. We're not really particular about that. Just whatever fits in and matches is what I'm interested in. I want it to look nice and match what we already have. So that's pretty much the report on signage.
Mr. Chairman, could I speak a moment about the, this matrix that I had everybody sign on?
Sure. Does that fit in one of the other categories or?
Yeah, farmland protection.
Okay, well, we'll go back up to farmland protection and call on Mr. David to show us his matrix.
Keeping with our mission to try to be an advocate for the farmer and ways to protect farmland, I've been doing quite a bit of research, and I know Charlie knows what I'm talking about. How many times have you heard a farmer say, the county needs to do something about protecting their farmland? You've heard, a lot of people say that, not just including farmers. But there's really nobody can give a direct answer what can be done, if that makes sense. I believe I'm saying that correctly. But I think there is something that's already available for the farmers, and I think it would really help them. And I want to back up and say, I've said it 100 times, I'm not a big proponent of this strict zoning and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not, but sometimes you gotta, as I've said before, you gotta use the tools that's in the toolbox. And there's this matrix in the zoning called agricultural district. It's the second one over from the left. You see where it says TRD and then AD? If you will look down through here, all through the other pages, the P stands for permitted, the X stands for not permitted, and the S stands for special permission, special exception, and the C stands for conditional uses. And just on the first page, you can see that I count just 3 X's that you can't do. The rest is either you can do it, you have to have maybe some special exceptions on some things. But the point I'm trying to make with this matrix is there's so much that you can do as far as agricultural in this stuff right here in this matrix that's allowed, and I think it really fits with the modern farmer today. If you'll notice, the third one over is ARD. Third from the left is ARD. That's agricultural residential. That's what my property's in. And I give you an example of how good it is. There is a subdivision down the road from me, and it's a strict subdivision. A lot of things you can't do in it, like you can't even have a garage door open after 6 p.m. I mean, I could go on, but that's just, if that's the way they want to live their neighborhood, that's fine. But there's a man that lives in that neighborhood, and joining the backside of his property, he bought 4 acres. And he put 2 cows, 1 horse, turkeys, and chickens on his property. And he built him a little barn back there. And not too long ago, I was at a local gas station where I live, and one of the people that lives in that neighborhood come up to me and said, "Can you believe that man has put cows and horses on the backside of our subdivision?" I said, "Well, sure, I can believe it." He said, "How's he getting away with that?" I said, "Because he's an agricultural residential district on that property. That property belonged to my petition 14 years ago when I petitioned for this. He can do that. And the subdivision can't do a blame thing about it." And that's why I've given the example before when I said, in this agricultural district, what if a big developer come into Charlie's community and wanted to put up 100 houses? He'd have to come up here and speak with Ed to start the process of getting the permits to do all this. Well, Ed will tell him he can't build 100 houses in that agricultural district, because right here the matrix says it's only allowed 10 per subdivision, 10 houses. Can't build a big subdivision. The county wouldn't give them building permits to start building. That's what this is for, is to protect people's land how they see fit. I think this is a golden opportunity for the farmers. Now, up in my neck of the woods, it's too late, but I think the folks in Fairplay and Oakway and Townville, down in there where farming is big, I think the farmers need to get together and think about this. Because I've heard it, like I said, I've heard it time and time again. We're worried about development down there and taking our farmland. Well, if you can use this right here as safeguards to protect your farmland. It's right here. All you got to do is the proper permits through the county to get it done. And like, for example, let's see the second one over, which is AD. If you look to your left, what all the permits you can do, I mean, everything that a farmer does today is allowed. Let's go down to, let's say, down to the first X, which is not permitted. What's not permitted is correctional facilities and halfway houses for, people getting out of jail. The next X is funeral homes and services down there. You can't have a funeral home down there. The next X is golf courses, country clubs, and drive ranges. It's not permitted. Well, we all know that a country club usually, and a golf course usually brings in houses, You go on over to the next page, we go down to the next X. A manufactured home dealer, heavy manufacturing is not permitted. Many storage warehouses is not permitted. Motor vehicle parking in garages, not permitted. Motor vehicle sales is not permitted. A movie theater is not permitted. Multifamily residential development, structures containing 5 or more residential units is not permitted. So a big developer with lots of money in his pocket comes to Oconee wanting to develop down there in that area. He can't. I just think it's a wonderful way to protect the farm and protect it the way you want it to be protected, because I'm living proof it works for me. The only thing I've got right now is horses, but I have a right, and my county's protecting me to keep my horses. I just think it's a no-brainer, and I'm open up for, tell me the pros and cons, what y'all think about what I'm looking at right here.
Years ago, about the time we started the fair, we were at Fairplay on the county property at that time. And matter of fact, back before we started this ag council, and we all got together and said, we need some kind of protection for agriculture in the county. We called it ag-res, agriculture residential.
Yeah.
What you talking about?
That's what I'm in.
And trying to get people to understand what you're saying and what we said in the past is hard, because it seems like people don't want to be told what to do with their land, but when these housing developments come next to them or up beside them, then, they want to answer, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
Well, we got the answer right here.
Yeah.
This is it.
I mean, I don't know if I should do this in the form of a motion, I don't know, but I would love to see the representatives from Farm Bureau and Soil and Water, either a representative or several representatives to come and have a roundtable one meeting with us about this. I mean, I sometimes feel like I'm just spinning my wheels. I really want to figure out ways to help a farmer save his land. And this is, to me, and my own experience, there's folks all around me can't mess with me because I have agricultural residential on my property and they can't tell me what to do with my horses or my tractors or whatever, or I plow a field or cut a little hay. They can't tell me I can't do that. I
We
mean,
need to figure out, David, I think, is how, all of these got voted in somehow to be on this matrix.
yeah, well, I was one of the,
So
I was the second or third one to get this petition back in 2010 is when I did this. Because I knew that I was gonna be swallowed up in Lake Residential. And if you wanna know about what you can't do, you look over there at Lake Residential. I was about to be swallowed up. So me and several of my neighbors got together. We had a meeting at my house. We said, don't we want our community is actually was, established in 1848. It's called the Fairview Community. It's up Ebenezer Road. A lot of people don't know that, but the original old folks knows that. But our community is cut up into little communities, lake subdivision communities now. And we said, if we're gonna protect our Fairview community, and that's what our petition was called, the Fairview Community Rezoning Request. That's what it's called. And we got this, and that's the only thing that's really, it's worked out. I mean, I can do what I want to on my land based on what I can do on this matrix. I'm never gonna put a funeral home on my property, and I'm not gonna have a movie theater on my property, but there's a lot of things I can do. And if we don't, and I was, back in 2007, 2006, I said, there ain't nobody gonna zone me and tell me what to do on my property. I'm eating crow today, okay? I have to sit back and have a little bit of humility and say that in order for somebody in Oconee County today that's got zoning implemented, you better put your property in a situation where you want it, because I promise you somebody else will if you don't. And I wish that the farmers could just look at this, because I know, even I talked to Tim Donald, he said farmers are some of the most independent, don't want to be told what the people they are, and I get it. I'm still that way kind of. But I had to use this in order to protect my way of life, the way I wanted to keep my land is the way I see fit, and it works for me. So I'm living proof it works for me. And I don't know why we don't talk about this more. I mean,
I don't think we know how to talk about it, to tell you the truth, David.
Yeah.
We don't know enough answers.
That's why I would love for, like, Ed, or even, you remember I tried to get David Root to come here one time, but he was out of town or something. And I want people to ask a bunch of questions, because I did. A long time ago, I asked a bunch of questions, and I'm to this day happy.
Could the county be made ag-res?
There is an ag-res designation here.
I mean, just the whole county?
Oh, no, because there's already several, see all this list through here? Rural residential, residential, lake residential. There's 16 or 17 different zonings, and there's different zonings already, people's how they want their land. So, that might be a question Ed could answer, but I don't think you could do that. There's already zoning requests at different places in the county.
I don't know how you would.
If you were already in the ag business, could it be zoned ag-res?
You're saying if the land use is already agricultural by nature, could it still be a question for, the individual property owners or the communities that choose to get together, to, petition the county to change, to that?
I mean,
How many, you mentioned your neighbors, does it take a minimum number of people or acres to establish?
when I did our petition request back in late 2009, 2010, it was 200 acres and 51% of the people living within that 200 acres. I may be off a percentage or two, but that's what I remember. But now, it's a lot easier than back then. Seems like it's only 50 acres. Am I
50
correct, Ed?
That I have no information of at this time. I didn't understand that we would be discussing it, so I haven't learned that part of the code yet.
I
It's
remember
my
it got,
understanding-
one of these categories got reduced to 50 acres.
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, one of them did.
Yeah. Well, and I've looked at the map down in and I'm always referring back to Fairplay and Oakway and Townville. I'm telling you, Anderson's coming from the south or the north. Atlanta, Georgia's coming from the south. And there's gonna be all kind of houses down there if the folks in Oakway and Fairplay don't start thinking about it. If they love their farmland, they need to start thinking about this. It's coming, but you can protect your land from overdevelopment through this. It clearly says no more than 10 homes can be built in a subdivision. It says it right here. And the county, I talked to James, who was here before Ed, and I said, James, what would you do if a big developer with a lot of money come into Oakway and wanted to build 100 houses and it's zoned agricultural district? He said, well, the county won't give them a permit to build a house because it's zoned agricultural district. Boom, development's not gonna happen.
Are you doing it now, Ed, since James is gone?
I'm following the same playbook essentially. I haven't been approached with that question, but the intent is that nothing has changed in the zoning ordinance or in any of the ordinances that would cause the planning department now to interpret anything differently than it has been in the past.
The reason why I asked that, because he was working on my farm when he left, and I'd like to continue it. I need to get it in.
But you mentioned the whole county being an ag-res. You got Lake Residential right here, okay?
I was just talking about the people that claim agriculture on their taxes.
Yeah.
And claim their land to be a farm. To me, I think it ought to, if you're coming up here and say, look, I farm on my land, I get discounted rate or whatever you get, you should automatically be ag-res or agriculture. You need to be zoned right then.
Well, you can do that as long as don't hold me 100% to this. I'm sorry I didn't have the proper numbers in front of me, but I believe it's 50 acres.
50 acres.
And 51% of the people within that 50 acres. Now, you're gonna have somebody that's gonna yee-haw and slam a door in your face. They did me. But they still got, because we completely circled a couple of the naysayers, their land got still put in ag-res, but they just slammed the door and didn't wanna hear what I had to say. So they don't care. But over 51% of my neighbors did care. And we went through the process, everything what the planning department and the planning commission told us to do, we done everything right. And it takes 3 readings for the county council. Once the planning commission approves it, looks it over, what you wanna do, there'll be a first reading, a second reading, and a third reading with the county council, and then it's done. Your land is, if you wanna call it protected, that's a good word. If you want it, it'll be to where you have say over your land. And it's a protection. Because right now, everybody knows, that every piece of land in Oconee County is already zoned. Y'all know that, right? There's no land in Oconee County that ain't zoned. It's called control-free. So when it's control-free, that means a developer or a farmer or
Except for grazing.
anybody can come in there and do what they want because it's control-free. Now, if you protect your land and your neighbors want to get with you and become a big team, it's like a big ball team. We're together on this, our neighbors and me. We're all farmers. We all want to band together. And the Right to Farm Act even will help you even more, because it clearly says in the Right to Farm Act, it protects against nuisance suits. Say you had 20 hogs on your property and somebody moves in next to you and all of a sudden they don't like the hogs, tough. The Right to Farm Act's gonna protect you. Now, if you wanted to put 20 hogs in the middle of Walhalla, the Right to Farm Act won't protect you because they're zoned according to the city life, the way people wanna live in the city. So you won't put 20 hogs in the middle of Walhalla because they are using that word protected. Why not the farmer protect himself? And it can be done. I'm, like I said, I keep sounding like a broken record, but I'm living proof it works for me. And over 300 acres of my neighbors all together in that little community.
Maybe we could get Mr. Coley had a couple of slides he brought to a meeting, and it had this on it. It was very easy and easy to understand, only a couple of slides. It only took a couple minutes to talk about, but maybe we could get that information and put it out there.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of ideas as to where, maybe we'll come back to it, take a little recess, let Mr. Richards set up. Hi, Richard. Do you need to set up anything, or are you gonna use the screen, or?
Do you want me to pull that presentation up, Charlie?
I think it'd be good.
Okay.
We can recess, or we can keep yakking, whatever you wanna do, whatever.
If I can, all I need's a HDMI plug-in, would that work? Or I'm probably have it on a flash drive too, would that work?
Imagine we can make that work, yeah.
But we
Okay.
could, David,
wanna do a
take that
little recess?
information, he's got it on a slide or two, and put it up, and we could give it, at places like this town hall meeting, we just found out there's gonna be a town hall meeting Thursday night at 6:30 with the delegation there, and it's a town hall, so it's question and answer, so I don't know if it's appropriate, but we might bring up some of this stuff as town hall subject. The fair's coming up. I've mentioned to the fair board, we might want to put a display of agriculture up there. They said that's fine if y'all can man it a little bit, not just leave it all the time unmanned, but some facts and figures on agriculture in Oconee County for the public to see. This would be a good topic to go in with that. So there's some places we can inform people.
Well, the good thing though, Rex, is the state delegation, this is a county thing. State got nothing to do with it. This is a county ordinance, right?
Right, it might not be appropriate for a town hall meeting, but there are our local delegates.
I think something else that might help too, Rich, is going, you know how we went each district,
Yeah,
this issue, that way you're gonna be, hey, we can have one in Fairplay, we can have one in Oakaway, we can go in the farming districts and
Yeah.
do this meeting.
Well, and like I said, there's no hope for where I live. My little 300 acres, we're just foreign people now in our own community because everybody's moved in around us. I'm just trying to lay it out there as clearly as I can tell you. But the folks in Fairplay, Oakaway, Townville, who's a big farming communities, some up Salem, some Westminster, and surrounding areas in Seneca that's got farm, they got a way to protect it. And I just keep preaching about it, and I know it works, and it works for the other folks that wants it too. Just like the Lake Residential right here, I'm not gonna be able to put no hogs on any of their property. Why can't the farmer also have that same right? That what he can and can't do on his property, and he can, and it won't cost you a dime. Well, I don't know, there may be a fee now, it wasn't back then, but there may be a fee to do it, $20 or $30 to get the paperwork done. I don't know, I'm not saying that it is, but back when I done it, it wasn't. And it won't cost you a dime.
And I assume the procedures is somewhere on the county website on how to get zoning designations or whatever.
Again, research.
I imagine there's instructions, and David could probably tell us how he did it, and I'm
Yeah.
sure the instructions are there, but that's, we took the meetings on the road, but it took us a year to do that, because every meeting, we'd go to a different district, so it took, 5 months, 6 months. But if we plugged into some meetings that the community would invite us to, then this meeting is set up, and we might just go and say, hey,
That's
this
why-
is a good, here's some info you might like.
But they might
You gotta protect your place.
See, I know that the Farm Bureau has a list of names and addresses of farmers. I mean, that's a connection right there. If somebody wanted to have a meeting at the farm center one day about all this and have some facts out there for people to answer and questions about. I'm telling you, it works for me, and I almost was designated lake residential on my property, almost. And I jumped ahead of them. I jumped ahead of their permit and got my permit in before they did. And back then, I don't know about now, back then, whoever's in line next is for the planning department to hear your request is how it worked back then. And I think it's probably the same way now. They shouldn't skip over somebody. And I was very lucky. I got agriculture-related products or things that I could do related to agriculture that I couldn't if I just sat back, closed the door, hadn't said anything. Somebody, Lake Residential man come up, knocked on my door, and I slammed the door in his face like it was slammed in my face. I would have been Lake Residential because I didn't care. I slammed the door in his face. I didn't want to hear. But if we got to start taking notice of this and start thinking about it. That's how you can help your farm.
I know you was talking about the helps, in the Right to Farm Act and all that, we got that through the Farm Bureau now. That's a big help. And one thing that we're working on in our resolutions with the Farm Bureau this time is the receptacle setbacks.
Yeah.
In other words, if you've got a chicken farm, somebody comes right next to you, want to build a house, they've got to set back as far as I would have to set back if I was building chicken houses. Ain't that right?
Well,
In other words, if it's 1,000 feet that I have to go back from a property line to build, then they got to go to that property line, and they're gonna have to be 1,000 feet to build a home too.
well, see, that's a good thing, but you mentioned the Right to Farm Act. The Right to Farm Act says that it's not going to, and this is another important thing about zoning. The Right to Farm Act says that it's not gonna go against some county or municipality in a zoning designation. However, if it is zoned agriculture, that's when the Right to Farm Act will back you up.
That's right.
That's what I'm saying. You can't put 20 hogs in the city of Walhalla. And then you start calling and say, I'm calling you legislator, well, I got the Right to Farm Act. No, you don't, because the city of Walhalla has zoned to not have 20 hogs in there. So Right to Farm Act's not gonna help you. The Right to Farm Act will help you if you've already helped yourself by designating your farm agricultural zone, and the county recognizes it as zoned agriculture. See, that's the big thing. The county's gonna back you up if you're zoned agricultural farming or farming products. See what I'm saying? You're kinda out there just a sea, with a ship adrift if you're just floating around and not trying to protect your land. And some developer will come and make sure what's going on in your neighborhood if you don't take a hold of the reins right now. I just think it's something that we should keep talking about. I wish the farmers, especially the guys that's got 500, 600, 700 acres, they need to really look at this.
All right, we'll explore some ways to get that information out, and we'll talk about some ways to do that in a little bit.
Richard's coming
Let's-
to give his
Let's,
presentation.
let's move on to Mr. Richard Carr from Farm Bureau. He's gonna talk about, conservation easements. And we're glad you could come and
Yeah.
appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank y'all for letting me do that. And if you don't mind, I'll just say next slide if that works. So a little bit, real quick, I started working with Farm Bureau, June 1st of 2023, but I had been in land conservation, several years prior to that and had really sort of, but in the upstate, cut my teeth there. But in June, I was hired to basically help Farm Bureau get their land trust off the ground. So we're a relatively new entity, you know, just a little over a couple years old. But we've kind of hit the ground running and have been very successful and have been working with several folks in Oconee County as well. So we'll go through. What I want to do is give y'all kind of a base understanding of a conservation easement and how it works, what it does and doesn't do. And then if y'all want to ask any questions and really dig into some more detail, I'd be happy to answer. But just real quick, we were actually established in December of 2022, launched in June of the following year. Coverage area is statewide, and really why Farm Bureau decided to do the land trust is our overall mission is to support agriculture in South Carolina. And we felt like helping folks permanently protect their agricultural lands was just another way to do that. We're involved in the political side, the market side, the people side. So this just seemed natural to bring the land into it as well. So next slide. So let me first talk about the issue, and y'all understand the issue, but let me give you some ways of thinking about it on, how Oconee fits into the larger picture, if you would. So this is a visual, and Charlie's passing one around, but if you'll kind of look there in the southeast, anywhere you see that kind of splotchy red, and the darker it gets, the higher it is, that is conversion of agriculturally productive lands being converted into development. And I don't know if y'all can really make out that the northwest corner of South Carolina, but it's pretty much covered up. If you really broke down that map and got to looking at what's happening in the state, you can see that 85 corridor from Charlotte all the way to Atlanta is pretty much covered. You got your hot, your dark spots of Spartanburg and Greenville in there. Then you come down 26 and you can kind of see Columbia, Lexington County. And then when you get down on the coast, you can see all the growth around the coast. But in particular, the Piedmont of South Carolina is being covered up with development, and conversion of farmland is happening significantly. Now, this is actually from data that was put together by the American Farmland Trust from 1992 to 2012. So this is even old. This is over a decade old. So, it's worse than what you see here, if you would. Next slide. So this is a good example. This is back in 2015. On the left, you see the black development in the upstate. And then based on projected pave-over rates and where development was moving outside of, the major areas, you can see it kind of growing and where it's projected to be in 2040. I would say, though, 2015, even that's a decade old. The real estate market really took off after 2015. So we expect that what we're looking at there is probably more like 2030 to 35 than 2040. So that's just a good kind of visual. So let's look at the numbers, what that really means nationally. And we're going to be looking to update this data, but we got enough from that time period of 92 to 2012, 20-year period. Nationally, we lost 31 million acres of farmland lost to development. But here are two key things that concern us and I hope would concern y'all. 41% of that, which is almost half of that development, was in rural areas. So it's not just suburban and urban areas that are, that being on the edge of those. Almost half of that development is just in the countryside to begin with. And 62% of that, almost 2/3, was on agricultural lands. I think a good way to think about it, South Carolina has created a phenomenal farm to market road system. So, all of our farms are very accessible by vehicle and have been since World War II. Well, now the market's growing out on those roadways out to the farm. So, you know, a lot of the development we see, they come out to a 300, 400 acre farm. It's mostly cleared. Land's been worked. It's not raw land for a long time. Makes a very attractive package for a new development. And, you know, we see a lot of these developments even have the names of the old farms on them when they do get developed. So that's what that really looks like, and you can kind of understand. But that 2/3 of development happening on agricultural lands means that our farmland is in the crosshairs of this development more than any other type of land. So that's concerning to us. Statewide, between '01 and '16, we had lost about 287,000 acres. Projected by 2040 to lose another 440. If you put that all together, that's about 2 full counties worth of farmland lost that will be lost in South Carolina. Some numbers on that: 3,600 farms based on that acreage, 239 million in economic output, and 5,900 jobs. Real quick before I move on, the largest private economic sector in South Carolina is still agriculture. It's still the largest private economic sector. So when we talk about economic development at the expense of ag, you know, we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. So I think we need to hold that in our head as we have these talks about development being positive at the expense of an economy that's already here. So there's a give and take there. So if you got an issue like that, farmland loss, there's really only 2 viable solutions. And if you would, the first one is regulation, which y'all kind of are really working on. What can a county do? Because the good news is most land policy is set at the county level, which y'all are very aware of. Not at the state level or at the federal level, which means accessible, influential. These are things that we can help mitigate, mediate, perhaps even prevent. Using certain tools, agricultural zoning, performance zoning, conservation districts, these are all good things. The only issue with regulated land use, though, is that now you're impacting landowner rights. And, you know, now decisions about your property could be being made by the county government. It's going to impact what you can do with your property. That's the disadvantage of regulation. If you all of a sudden get put into a certain area or zoning area, what you can do with your property gets restricted by somebody else making that decision. So that's the downside to regulation. So we felt like, having studied the issue, that doing a land trust, and a land trust primary tool is the conservation easement, actually created an opportunity that was voluntary, landowner initiated. When we work with our landowners, we help develop the terms of the easement. We work together with the landowner to develop the terms of what can and can't be built on the property. As long as we're working within certain guidelines, we have flexibility. So now it's in the hands of the property owner to make that decision about restricting the use of their property, not somebody else at a county council level making that decision. And then on top of that, it offers financial benefits. So if we go to the next slide, the first thing I want to do is talk about what a conservation is, and then I want to talk about the benefits that come from it. First of all, what they do is they prevent development. That is the key thing that a conservation easement is doing. It is, a lot of folks have a perception that conservation easements are essentially to create like nature preserves. It is about preventing full-scale development on that property. That's the number one thing that it does. In it, a landowner legally grants, and you do that by placing an easement on certain conservation values. I'm going to give you some examples of those in a minute. And in that, the landowner legally grants this easement on the values to the land trust. So we hold it. And that's how it's incredibly effective, because if they sell that property or descendants get that property, the easement goes along with it. We're the ones responsible for making sure the terms of the easement are not violated. So you don't lose that ability to, a a deed restriction or trust and others, all of those things can be gotten around, they can be undone, they all expire at some point anyway. But because of an easement and the land trust holds it, we are the ones that actually hold it. And so for that reason, it's in perpetuity, which is the legal term for forever. So they're a very strong tool and legal instrument. What they do not do is affect your ownership of the property. We do not take ownership of the property. It's just like any other easement, right-of-way easement. It doesn't necessarily give up full control of the property or ownership. It does not affect agricultural activities, with the exception of some concentrated animal feeding operations cannot be in easements, but some can. Well, what we think of as CAFOs are actually not defined as CAFOs. There are certain size poultry operations that can be in a conservation easement. There's a threshold there defined by the EPA that we work within. All other agricultural activities, livestock, row cropping, whatever the case may be, can be done. We, agriculture, agritourism, you pick, we've done them all. We put easements on all of these properties, the types of properties in the last 2 years. Doesn't affect forest management. In fact, we write in timber management. The only thing we ask is you use a registered forester because they're obligated to put together a plan that follows best management practices. So that's kind of how we write those. Doesn't affect recreational activities, hunt, fish. You can lease it for hunting, fishing. It does not prevent construction of personal residences. It does limit how many you can build, but it doesn't restrict it. And it doesn't prevent the construction of agricultural structures. We can put in allowances for that, and I'll talk about that here on the next slide. So 2 key definitions to understand how an easement works. First is this idea of conservation values. These are the things that are being protected. But the other part of an easement is we define the landowner's reserve rights. What do they want to continue to do on the property? And they are very clearly defined so that it can never be questioned in the future, because the document has essentially put those reserve rights in very specific writing so that anybody could pull that easement up in 50 years and not only know what was being protected, but what the landowner wanted to reserve the right to continue to do on the property. So it's very well defined in the document. So let's talk first about conservation easement values. If you look, this is the Shealy Farm in Newberry County, and you only have to have one conservation easement, conservation value in an easement to make it viable. We typically put 3 because it makes sure that it's strong and it can't be challenged if you press the buttons, I think. So the first one is actually rural view shed. So y'all see that's a road running through the middle of the property there. There's actually a highway on this side. What that's basically saying is once that farm is conserved, it'll never be developed. So it'll always either be open space, farmland, or forest along that highway. So that doesn't just benefit the landowner or the family that wants to keep it that way. It benefits the general public because they continue to ride down that road and see that farm, or it could be a forest as well. Because it can, in our easements, you can plant timber and ag lands, and you can clear timber to create ag lands. Second is, in this particular case, it was really important. This property is 94% prime and statewide important farmland soils. So very high value row crop agriculture. So we can claim those prime and statewide farmland soils as a conservation value. So it limits, building and all that could be done on those soils. That benefits the general public because it's food security. So we now know we've got this land that will not be part of that 61% of conversion from farmland to development. And so we know that our ag productivity is protected. And then third, we do actually, we claim some natural areas, but that's only within the standard, the stream management zone within timber, which is usually 40 feet from the bank. So we just claim those creek areas as natural habitats. You can still manage for diseased trees, storm damaged trees, invasives, and that sort of thing. But other than that, and you You can run cattle in them too, if that's where they water, but you can't harvest timber past that 40 foot, and in a best managed practice, that's, gonna be there anyway when you're managing timber, so we claim those natural areas. If you have wetlands or something like that, we can put that in there as well. All right. So the next thing is reserve rights. So we've identified what we're protecting, so now what is the landowner reserving the right to do? So in a general way, if you have a farm or a private family farm that includes farming and recreation and timber management and all that, once the easement is on it, if we write it correctly, it doesn't change. You walk away from that closing and go back to your property and do exactly what you were doing the day before to close. That's how it should be written. What you can't do is subdivide that property and sell it off to a developer or even a commercial development. So let's look at some specific reserve rights. Here's the whole suite of them right here that covers most of them. We talk about structures, what are we reserving the right for there, and then we talk about activities. You can put in new residences and ag structures. We usually put those into what are called building areas or envelopes. On a residence, we'll do 1 acre, 2 acres, even 3 if somebody feels like they need it for a residence. We identify where those are going to be. We can do 3 different residential areas for the one future residence. You can obviously continue to manage existing residences and then add future residences for family and that sort of thing to be built on the ease property. And then ag structures. We can set aside areas, even larger areas, several acres, 5 acres, 6 acres, and put multiple areas where you can do grain storage, stables, barns, all that kind of stuff. So those can be within the easement as well. And then we get into activities, agricultural activities, equestrian activities, agritourism, all the way up to U-Pick and roadside stands, timber management. We can allowances for new ponds or impoundments to be built on the property. So that's reserving the right to do stuff in the future. So that's pretty much how the easement kind of works. There are 3 main benefits that come from an easement. Originally, it was primarily federal income tax deductions. Whatever value you gave up in the property by putting the easement on it, you could claim it as a non-cash charitable donation. So it was more of a federal income tax play. Then South Carolina got in the game in 2000 and passed legislation that added 2 additional benefits. The first is South Carolina state tax credits that are capped at $250 per acre. We actually think that cap's going to get raised next year. We're hopeful. We've been working because it's 25 years ago. It was time to raise it because it's just values have increased so significantly. So, and those are credits, not deductions, so they're dollar for dollar. And then cash funding, and they created the South Carolina Conservation Bank. And the Conservation Bank now offers up to 50% of the value of an easement you can get in cash funding if it's a working farm. You can get up to 35 or 40 on just good land good farmland that isn't owned by a farmer. Could be somebody you lease from or something like that. We can still get pretty good money, but for our working farmers who own their land, we can get up to 50% of easement value. So let me show you what that looks like. Easement value is calculated by an appraiser who comes in and does a fair market value appraisal. What would it sell to the highest bidder? Then he's gonna do a second appraisal as if the easement is on it. With those restrictions in place, what is that gonna bring the price down to? Kind of that ag value, private party value, we might say. And then the remainder is the difference between those two is the value of an easement. So let's look at an example. I think this one is really relevant for here. This is probably a sweet spot example for up here. 200-acre working farm in a developing area, quasi-developing area. Fair market value of about $10,000 an acre, so that'd be $2 million in land value. Post easement, that drops to about 5. So you drop down to about $1 million, which means you lose $1 million in value in that immediate appraisal. And so that $1 million becomes the value of the easement. Now, we'll say this, that value with the easement on it is still susceptible to the market. It can go up and go down based on where the market goes. We're actually seeing properties down on the coast that were eased back in the early 90s that are selling at fair market value now because they're the only green space around. So it doesn't mean you're locked into this forever. It just means that it, for now at least, is going to reduce that value. But as things develop around green space value tends to go up, easement or not. So if you had that $1 million easement value, you could just say, I want to donate that. I don't want any compensation. And you would get a $1 million federal tax deduction that you could use for 15 years or until it ran out. If you're a farmer, you can claim that on 100% of your income every year. Everybody else can apply 50% of their income towards that deduction until they use the $1 million up or the 15 years runs out. If we go and get grant funding, however, and let's say it's a working farmland, like Charlie's place, we were able to go get 50% of that value in cash from the Conservation Bank. That is granted to the land trust by the state bank, and then we pay the landowner that amount, so they're not obligated to the state. We are the ones that it's granted to, but it's for them, that we pay 100% of it to them. Be $500,000 in cash payment, $50,000 in state tax credits that do not expire, by the way, and they are transferable. So if you can't use them all, you can give them to family or even sell them. And then you'd have a $500,000 federal income tax deduction to go along with it that a farmer could use against 100% of his income every year for 15 years until it was out. For everybody else, they could apply it to half their income every year and reduce their tax bill. There are some non-monetary benefits. This really helps families with estate planning because when you do an easement, you got to really have everybody on board in the family, and you're really setting the future for that property. And so it's a good time for folks to think about that land, because in a lot of families, that's the largest financial asset that they're going to be passing down to the next generation. You know, it can be a multi-million-dollar land. You know, I come from a land-rich and cash-poor family. I think a lot of us are that way. And so it's a large financial asset that you now have a more clear understanding of how the future is set up for that property, and it helps with estate planning. Peace of mind knowing that you've sort of planned it out and everybody's on board with it. And they know what the property can be used for, what it can be sold for, and what they can do on the property moving forward. And obviously, the reason why Farm Bureau got into this is to help conserve land for the future of agricultural production. So we don't get into a land crisis because of development. We got some priorities when we're looking. We're looking first at working farmlands with existing agricultural infrastructure, you know, irrigation, grain storage, you know, tractor storage and that sort of thing. We'd like to see tracts of contiguous property in traditional agricultural communities. So Oconee sets up fantastic for that. You know, we got this whole area from Fairplay up to Oakaway up to Walhalla, and it's a traditional ag community. Let's try to do as much as we can to sort of create a neighborhood of conserved agricultural properties. We're also looking at, is it under threat of development? And then lastly, for our row croppers, we're really looking at that soil quality. Is it 2/3 of the acreage more? Not so much in the upstate because we got a lot of cattle operating. You can grow grass on you know, marginal soil. So it's not as big a deal. But when we're looking at row crop, we're really looking at that soil quality as well. So we got 24 farms under easement now, about 70. Yeah, that 7,400 acres is still right, because 22 was actually, we had 2 farms that were done in 2 different easements, so that's where the 24. We've secured $9.4 million in funding, that 100% of that went to the landowners on that acreage. We got 24 more farms in process right now. We got folks calling us weekly, interested in moving forward, so. We can just skip through this real quick, but this is Hazelwood Dairy, one of our first farms in Chester County. That's Shealy Farm down in Newberry. Watson Farm over in Chester County, they're doing pasture-raised poultry and beef and pork and doing a lot on that property, working with the easement. Riverdale down in Sumter, doing irrigated ag. Keese Family Farm, Lee Keese, just got approved. In fact, Lee was the last one to get the money from Oconee Conservation Bank before they cut it. But Lee got in, and then this is Earl Threlkill's place over in Chester County, south of Charlotte. Funny thing, that picture right there, not the cow, but the other, there were 7 or 8 different scenes shot in the movie The Patriot in that one spot right there. They just moved the cameras around to different angles in order to get it. So pretty cool story there, but heck of a cattle operation over there. So that is the full deal. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good. What's the best way for us to share this?
Well, right now, we've got a lot of folks that we're working with in Oconee, and I mean, I think word of mouth is, you know, and through Farm Bureau has been really good. But yeah, I mean, basically, that sheet you got right there is a great one to share with folks. It talks about what a land trust is, what a conservation easement is. It's got my contact information on there. That would be something you could share. If y'all want a digital copy of it, I could get it to you for sure, and just pass that around.
You mentioned Farm Bureau is the entity that enforces the restrictions for the easement. How do you do that? Like, what if I put my land in an easement and I'm dead and gone, and my daughter or my son moves away from here and they have no interest in farming and it starts growing up in weeds? What happens?
So we do an annual visit, annual stewardship visit, and we work with every landowner. You know, when there's a change in ownership of the property, whoever inherits it or purchases it, the easement comes up in the title search, so they know there's an easement on it. We get in touch and work with whoever the next owner is gonna be. But at that point, we make our regular annual stewardship visit. We call for permission to come on the property, but if we're refused, we do have the right. If we've shown that we've tried to make reasonable requests to have access and it was not granted, we can come on the property and check to make sure that it's not being violated. But, you know, that would be in an extreme case. You know, most folks we work with.
Well, I mean, what if, I'm using an example, my son moves to New York and I'm dead.
Right,
He owns the property now.
right.
And he says, I don't care nothing about farming, I'm making $1 million up in New York.
Yeah.
What happens to the land?
He can sell it if he wants to. Just the
But-
easement goes with it.
But if he just sets on it, the easement's fine.
Totally fine. Yep,
And then his son, it's just totally fine.
totally fine. Yeah, we don't require, I mean, once we write the terms of the easement, the activities, the structures or whatever are there for y'all to determine whether you want to use them or not. If y'all want to leave the land fallow, that's not our business, that's your business. So we don't manage the property. We just make sure that whatever the terms of the easement are not being violated with stewardship.
But the conservation easement is recorded in the deed though, correct?
That's correct. It's on county record, so it's a deed of conservation easement, but it's not a deed of ownership. But it is permanently attached to the deed of ownership. So wherever the deed of ownership goes, the easement goes with it.
What did you mean when you said deed restrictions you can get by deed restrictions?
So you can put deed restrictions, you can say, like if I sell my property, you know, if you buy this property from me, or if my property is sold, you know, it can't be developed or whatever the case may be. There's nobody to enforce that if you're not around. So if you sell it to somebody else with deed restrictions and they decide to violate that and develop the property, you gotta sue them personally, and you gotta bear that expense. If you got an easement on it and there is a violation of somebody decides to develop, we have legal insurance on all our easements. We have up to $3 to $4 million in legal expenses for each violation, and so we have our.
But it might have to go to court too, though, right?
Hmm?
It might have to go to court though,
Yeah.
too, right? So it'd be a
Yeah.
suit.
You know, if we got a landowner we're working with and they, let's just say they make they do something that the easement didn't allow for, and we can mediate things out. We can try to horse trade a little bit, figure it out.
But somebody could try to sue to get,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so in that case, we're the ones that bear that cost and that issue. And, if there's nobody there to enforce a deed restriction and it's violated, what's the point? You know, if it's somebody's wishes and then somebody violates it, but there's nobody there to really do anything about it. So, we're there every year checking on the property and are able to ensure that it's not bad. Trust also have you can put in a trust about development, but they do have I can't remember exactly what it is, but they can only be held valid for so long. I think it might be one generation or something like that, then trust can be overruled. It's a legal term, but it basically expires.
Is that what you meant by a deed expiring?
Yeah, and with deed restrictions are a little more specific and are in like the first deed of sale that's written about the property. But a trust is like when you leave, you put the property in a trust and it's held under certain restrictions to the immediate generations. That's only good for about one generation, and then it expires. So, just point being is other ways to protect land are ultimately vulnerable to be undone and can be undone in certain legal ways, particularly when developers decide they want a piece, they can figure it out. But when a land trust holds it and can deal with it, it's,
Couldn't get mine.
yeah. So anyway, yeah.
The questions come up too, Richard, like, say for instance, if a landowner puts it in the easement, the land trust, later on, they quit farming, but they want to keep the land. And used to, a lot of people would put their land in game management with DNR
Right.
and get a little money, from them. I guess you're leasing it to the DNR.
Yeah.
Can that still be a thing?
Yeah, absolutely, because wildlife management, we put wildlife management and activities in our leases, so yeah.
I had that question asked
Yeah.
last week, matter of fact.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the land that is in WMAs, like Natural Land Trust, has bought, eased, and then sold land to DNR. That actually what Natural Land Trust does. State and federal agencies can't buy properties quick. It takes them 2 to 5 years to do a transaction. So they can't respond to market conditions to buy something that can get bought up. So the Nature Conservancy, Natural Land Trust, Open Space Institute, they will actually go out and buy core properties with the understanding that they are going to hold it, ease it, and then sell it to, say, DNR as for WMA land, or to go in the national forest. And so, yeah, there's plenty of public lands out there that we're using right now that
That's a good
have
thing.
easements on.
Good thing.
So that wouldn't take that off the table. It'd actually be attractive for the purchaser.
Good information.
Very good. Thank you for telling us about this.
One last thing, another tool we used in funding was the Oconee Conservation Bank. And the thing that we could do there is we could get additional funding at the county level that the state could use as a match. And what we could do is actually cover all the expenses for the landowner when they did their easement. So they could get 100% of their funding from the state. We could get some money from the Oconee Conservation Bank to cover their expenses. So they could ease the property, get their funding, cover their expenses, and it was conserved. And that's, so losing that money was important,
We actually sent a letter to the county council requesting, for that funding to come back, but
Yeah.
if you had any way to guide us through it, to maybe help get that back, it would be.
Yeah, and I know there's folks in the conservation community working on that, because ultimately it was Duke, Energy that put all that money up. And, but we had just gotten, Lee Keys was our first project we got approved, and I had 3 more lined up that we were gonna be running through the bank and before it got cut. So it was, it was an incentive for landowners, it was an additional incentive, it was state match money for the state bank that helped them sort of justify what they do. But anyway, it's unfortunate, but anything we can do to help there, just let us know.
More questions?
Good deal?
Very informative. Thank you
Yeah,
for coming.
Thank y'all. We
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm gonna hit, I gotta get back to Spartanburg. Is it all right if I?
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. We
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So, we'll just be creative in ways we can get the information to people. That pretty much wraps up what we were gonna talk about, except for district reports. Who wants to go first? District 1 and 2 and this, for District 3, that's me. We have the Farm Center, they had a great event there yesterday, drew quite a crowd of people. And one of their big events for the year is coming up, the 23rd through the 27th, the Heritage Fair at the Farm Center. They would love to have our participation. They would like some volunteers to help with the agricultural simulator. They've got a simulator they're bringing in. Read in the paper where they brought it to James Brown Elementary a few weeks ago. But it's a simulator to put the kids in and give them some demonstrations on agriculture. So a volunteer would be needed to help greet them and help them in the building or the unit, whatever it is, and then maybe a little bit of guidance through that. But they need volunteers for that. If we want to man an agricultural table, we will need a few volunteers for that off and on. And he said the heavy lift is Monday when they're setting up. So talk to me or Daniel Rothel. I'll refer you to Daniel because he'll plug you in where needed, but it'd be great if we could help them out. They'll be bringing school kids in on Thursday and Friday like they have done in the past. They brought in about 1,500 kids in 2 days from the elementary schools, and they show them a little bit about agriculture, and that's a great thing. So they're doing that on Thursday and Friday. Then the big fair, fair goes on all week. The big stuff, I guess, starts Friday, Saturday. But they could use volunteers. So I told them we would try to help them out. Information like this and like the agriculture importance of Oconee County could be some info we could present. I thought about the displays we used to have with the cards, the numbers, the illustrations. We had a wonderful pamphlet or display board card that we used to show and pass out. But we may ask if Ed, the county could help us print some just slides, some pictures or some info documents to have on the display, fix our display back up, and maybe some of us stand with it an hour or so here and there and talk about agriculture.
And Rick, so I'll touch on that. I printed up a lot of those last year for our extension trailer that we have at the fair, and it has a lot of the Oconee County ag statistics on those. It's got everything from, you name it, it's on there. And so we display those throughout the fair on the outside of our display. So most of that stuff will be, displayed on our booth,
Okay.
our trailer.
at the fair. I would like to also mention, since you mentioned the farm center, Monday, September the 15th is the Oak County Farm Bureau Farmers Appreciation Dinner at the Farm Center. All area farmers are invited, meal provided. Guest speakers, State Farm Bureau President Harry Ott, Dina Caffles at Clemson, Dr. Matt Holt, and Farm Service Agency Director Cody Simpson will be on hand. That's Monday, September 15th at 6 p.m. And usually have a pretty good meal and a good opportunity to be around a lot of farmers. Show you some
Good chicken.
Good chicken.
Excellent. And I've heard Mr. Ott before, he's really good. That was on my list of notes, I skipped over it, thank you for bringing that up.
Sorry.
No, I skipped it, thank you, but I didn't forget it because that is the same, well, they might need some help setting up for that too, I don't know, we'll talk to Charlie Farm Bureau, and we'll definitely talk with you about cooperating on the displays and the.
And we're more than happy at the extension trailer, any of the little, like you're talking about, the little pamphlets, whatever else, any of those, we'll put them out there for people to grab.
We don't have any printed up, but we'll see what you got, we'll
work
see
on.
what we can print or what we can do. But we'll definitely work with y'all on that. Mainly just being there, mixing, mingling with the public and telling them about agriculture. And this fair is a wonderful display or highlight to show the importance of agriculture. Farm Center's got a new, thrust going on, a new effort to raise awareness and promote it as a community thing. And agriculture is sort of one of the venues to promote community. So I think they're doing some really good work over there. We'd like to support them, so. Any other district reports?
I think I'm gonna make copies of these and give out the farmer appreciation. I think it would be good. Once you got them in one place, you can educate them on what's going on, what they need.
And possibly he can share some of his, one or two of his slides or whatever, something to attract attention and talking points. That's great. So we will continue to work towards those items and see what we can do to help promote agriculture. I don't have anything else, so that's the agenda pretty much. Are y'all ready to adjourn?
Make a motion.
A motion has been made to adjourn, second?
Second.
Second's made. All right, all in favor?
You believe.
You made this one. Thank you.